Spring unfolding, it is the perfect moment for a bit of renewal, both in our studios and on a personal level. So today we've put together a broadcast where we're going to help bring a little fresh perspective to your world. And we are going to be covering things like practical steps to get organized in the physical space, tips to manage and declutter. And where is that coming from, though? Let's try that. Tips to manage digital clutter, and also how to tap into some self-renewal and cultivate more joy and creativity so that we can avoid the burnout as we head into the spring recital season. So I'm very excited to share all of these things with you, but before we do that, we're going to play a little music and make sure we're going live in all the places and spaces. While we do that, let us know where you're tuning in from today. I look forward to having a conversation with you. Welcome to another Wednesday broadcast here at Savvy Music Studio. The topic of the day is let's revitalize with a little spring refresh. I am so excited to talk about this because I've been waiting for spring for what feels like 6 months here in Western PA. And I know a lot of you out there who also kind of live in the more northern climates may be feeling the same way right now. We are ready for spring. So let's talk about what we're talking about today. But before we do that, hey, if you're new here, my name is Sarah Campbell. I am a business strategist, mindset, and marketing coach for music studio owners and online education experts just like you. And we go live here most Wednesdays where we talk about those things. And today we're kind of dipping into a few of those topics, thinking about business strategies and mindset and all that goodness. And we're going to be examining, how can we apply a little spring refresh to our studios? All right, here we go. I see some people tuning in here today. Let's say hello. Harmony Music Education is tuning in from Spring, Texas. Your town's name's Spring? That's amazing. I did not know that. Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about this. Spring is a time for renewal and growth. It sets the stage for transformation. And talk about transformation. Where I live right now, we've gotten over 4 inches of rain in the last 24 hours. So things are certainly transforming, including the large ponds that we have behind our house that are now overflowing into the woods. But April showers bring me flowers. We're going to have a heck of a lot of flowers in May, is all I have to say at this point. So what we're going to be doing is thinking about how can we organize inside and outside so that we can enhance the space for creativity, productivity, and client experience and teacher experience, because this time of year gets a little sticky for a lot of music teachers because we have spring recitals going on. We are looking ahead to things like summer workshops and camps. We're kind of wrapping up the year, and all of our clients, in addition to doing things in our studio, they are all, things are ramping up. We're getting into band and concerts, they're not called recitals. What are they called? Somebody help me with that word. So we're getting into a lot of stuff. And this is the perfect opportunity to take a little pause and think about how we can renew and refresh ourselves. So let's get to it. We do have things set up with the Savvy Sarah bot today. If you drop the word spring down below, if you are on Facebook or if you are on Instagram, I see Dee Dee's Doodles, McGuffin Piano Studio, and Sings Things have joined us over on Instagram. Say hello over there. If you drop that word on Facebook or Instagram, you'll get a hold of the notes that I've put together from the Savvy Sarah bot. If you're watching on YouTube, please look in the pinned chat here, and you'll find a link that you can click on, and the Savvy Sarah bot will give you those things. Hey, Alexa Ray Official has also joined on Instagram. Nice to see you. All right, so let's get moving and grooving and get to our first point today. So we are discussing how can we renew and refresh. Hey there, Cindy. Hey there, Stephanie. All right, our first point of the day is to talk about physical organization tips. So this is one of my favorite topics because I am a little bit of a neat freak. I wish I was, I wish I could keep that going all the time, but that just does not happen. So how can we, refresh the physical environment around us? And you can use these tips to apply to your studio or your house or whatever. We are hoping to find a less cluttered space so that we can have a more focused and inspiring environment around us. And the other day I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts. It's called NPR Life Kit. If you're on the newsletter, you probably see me link to a lot of their stuff quite frequently. And if you're not on the newsletter, get on the newsletter. We have all kinds of cool stuff that goes out every week. If you want to get a hold of that, just drop newsletter down below and I'll hook you up. So I was listening to this specific episode, and they were talking about decluttering, and they broke it down into 5 types of clutter. And I found this fascinating. So the 5 types were this: 1, laundry; 2, dishes; 3, things that have a home but are not in their home; 4, things that don't have a home but need a home; and 5, trash. So laundry, dishes, things that have a home, things that don't have a home, and trash. And as I was listening to that, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, if we can apply that concept to when we're, taking a little time to refresh our space, one of the suggestions that they had, which I thought was super cool, if you feel overwhelmed with decluttering a space, just pick one of those things. Now, I'm assuming, but we know what assumption does. I'm assuming that most of us don't have laundry and dishes in our studio. But who knows, right? But those other things, the things that have a home but aren't in their place, or the things that, oh gosh, we got something new but it doesn't have a home yet, and things like clutter, right? We probably have those. I know I have those. So, take a moment, make a decision. Which one of those 3 things am I going to address in my space? And take a little time to declutter on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So some tips that I have, I apply this a lot to my own studio. Some tips that I have for finding homes for things, right? Because you bring in a lot, we might bring in a new resource. We might print out a new game. We might get like a delivery of books, etc. We might be sorting through like spring recital stuff, whatever it is. We want to think about how can we maximize space and keep those frequently used items super accessible. So one of the ways that I did this in my studio when I was starting to see like there was too much game clutter, is that I found an old filing unit, free, and what I did is I used that filing unit to file my games in it, which that felt tricky at first because a lot of the games had like small pieces and things like that. So I got a box of Ziploc bags. All the game pieces went into that. And then I filed the games. I used just regular folders that I had a hold of, and I wrote the name of the game. I wrote the level and the topic. And then I sorted my games in that file folder file cabinet. And it made it so much easier to access them later on. So I'm sure that there are many creative ways that you can also do the same thing, finding a way to maximize your space, but also keep those frequently used items like at hand so that you don't have to search for them. So when we're talking about that physical refresh, in addition to, doing things like decluttering, something that can also make spring feel a little bit more springy is take a little moment and think like, you know what? Do I need a slight change of scenery here? It can be as simple as rearranging one piece of furniture, or maybe adding a new plant. That little guy over there. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you saw my little post about my adventure as a plant lady and finding that guy yesterday. So things like rearranging furniture, adding a plant, popping up some new posters that deal with the season. anything that just makes you feel a little bit better, a little bit more inspired, a little bit more joy, go ahead, give yourself permission to do that. We love those types of things. Um, I love this. I have a ton of clutter and homeless things in my studio, right? It happens. It happens to all of us, right? Now, if you have a specific tip for, refreshing that space, what's your favorite way? I'd love to know from you if you're watching live or on the replay. What's your favorite way to refresh a space? And it doesn't have to be like repainting the walls or replacing all the furniture, all that stuff. What's one simple way that you like to refresh a space? Mine is getting new plants, which is slightly problematic. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so the final thing about the physical space is, how do we maintain that atmosphere? How do we maintain that freshness? I've talked about this on multiple broadcasts because I think it's really important. So one of the things that I like to do is to have an open and close routine for whatever space I'm working in. So whether I'm working here in the home office and working with teacher clients, or if I'm working in the studio, having some type of an open-close routine can be really useful, because part of that routine can be decluttering at the end of the day. We're organizing things at the end of the week. And when we break it down into those itty-bitty actions, like I can take 5 minutes at the end of the day and put away the things that we were working with, it's easy to maintain that atmosphere rather than ignoring that and then letting the things pile up. Now, granted, I just want to say, no shame. There's no shame. There's no judgment. We all fall into that time when I just don't have the capacity to declutter at this moment. And there's always an opportunity to do it at another time. So that's my little tips on physical organization. I love this. Let's bring up a couple of comments before we move on to the next tip. I see Haley, so nice to see you. Rebecca Piat is the queen of plants. Yes, she and I have this in common, and I love that about her. So lots of greenery around the studio. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plants in my studio, which I love. We can be co-queens. Yes, I love it. Well, you can share the crown. So that is our first topic, is decluttering the space. So I'd love to know your takeaways. What is one little thing that you can take away from that conversation about decluttering? I see that MacGuffin Piano Studio has commented with the word spring over on Instagram, so I'm going to make sure that we deliver that to you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Our second point of the day is this. Let's talk about digital cleanups. Ugh. Woof. Now, I want to mention at the top of this portion in the broadcast that the queen of digital organization, personally, I think it is Amy Chaplin. So if you don't know Amy Chaplin from Piano Pantry, write that name down and check her out. She's amazing. So I'm just going to brief over some of my tips, but if you're looking for like true digital organization, Amy's your gal. So one of the things Haley says, let's not talk about this. I know, right? It can be a little intimidating. So digital cleanup. Oh my gosh, everything, most things that we're getting nowadays for our studios, at least in my studio, it's a lot of digital stuff, right? It's a lot of downloaded music, games, resources, etc. And it's just the way that we are organizing our businesses. Most of it's gone digital. So I have a couple of tips for you that I hope will be helpful. One of the things is this: try to make things searchable. And the way that we can do that is to figure out some kind of a protocol for naming files. Sometimes when we download a file, like I was just thinking about, this happened to me the other week and I found it frustrating. Like when I downloaded the music, the file name that came with it, I understand why they do this. Like the file name had a bunch of letters and numbers that like represented my specific purchase, etc. And that's their naming protocol for their business, since they have a lot of sheet music. However, it made it difficult for me to search the name of that song. So what I'd like to do, I don't always do it, but what I like to do is when I look at that file name and I see, I'm not going to be able to search this file name, I'll take 5 seconds and rename the file so that I can find it later. Because if I accidentally put it in the wrong digital folder on my computer, or if I don't take the time to upload that into the app that I typically use for reading music in the studio, I will be able to use the find function on my computer to find it later. So that is, right? You're not supposed to. You don't have to. Not all of them. But sometimes if you look at the name of that file and it's just a bunch of like gobbledygook letters, and you know it's going to be hard to search for later, I do like to name the file so that it's easier to find. So that's the first tip that I have for organizing digital files. The second thing is I want you to think of your desktop, right, like a physical space. And clearing that desktop out on a regular basis. You get to decide what that time frame is depending on your own need. But I know for me personally, especially on this desktop here at home, I have to clean this desktop off at least once a week because I download so many different files and I pop them straight onto the desktop. Because they're oftentimes files that I'm not going to store long term. They're just things that I needed to download from Canva or like a screenshot that I had to take or whatever. So at the end of every week, I look at my desktop, I delete everything that needs to be deleted. And if there's something that doesn't need to be deleted, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to stay on the desktop so it's visible because it's something that I'm actually working on at that time, or it's going to be sorted into a folder. And I know that like if you are not in the practice of that and your desktop feels really overwhelming right now, me giving you that advice may not feel good. But trust me, take some time. You don't have to do it all at once, but take a little bit of time to start clearing out those folders and organizing things in a way that's easy for you to access. Now, I could go on and on about digital organization, but I don't want the whole broadcast to be about it. So those are like the typical tips that I have. Final thoughts about this is that if you want to declutter your desktop, but you want like new things to be accessible, one of the things that I've done in my studio computer is I have a file called new resources, and that's where all the new games go. And then I also have one called new music. That's where all the new music goes. And then every once in a while, those folders then get sorted out. Right. And then the final thing about digital clutter and like a little tip to deal with that is, take a little time to maybe review, and you don't have to do this all, I would do this like twice a year, review the apps and software that you're using, and have a little conversation with your team, which is you, and decide what are you going to keep, what needs to be updated, and what might, need to be replaced or just, blessed and released. And that can really help quite a bit. I see, oh, great. We've got a question. We have also got a takeaway. I'd love to know from what we just talked about with digital files, what did you find useful? And do you have digital, tips on digital organization? If you do, drop them down below. We'd love to hear those from you. Karen's takeaways to rename the files. Cindy, hey, nice to see you. She asks, what program do you use for your sheet music? Okay, so there's so many different apps out there that you can use. And I'll say the reason I use my app is because I'm already using this app for other things. So I tend to download a lot of music, purchase and download a lot of music from musicnotes.com. Partly because as a voice teacher, I find that the piano arrangements on there are better than most of the other sites that I've seen. They tend to have better arrangements that don't have a doubling of the vocal line because that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. But I also get a lot of pop music from there because there are some really fantastic arrangers. One of my favorites, of course, being Jennifer Eklund. My second favorite being Francesco Perino. I think that's his name. But that's really good. So the musicnotes.com app on iPad is fantastic because not only can you access all the music that you've downloaded through that, through that website, you can organize it via folder. So I have a folder for every single student in that app, and I put the songs that we're working on together in that folder so that I'm using the digital copy and they are using their physical copies. I also like it because I can import other PDFs. So if I purchase music from another vendor, I can import that PDF into that, and then it's all searchable, and I really love it. let's see. Oh yeah. This is great. So another one, I couldn't remember the name of it. I'm so glad you mentioned this. So there's one called Fourscore. And that is a really great one. Fourscore is a great way to like digitally organize all of your sheet music. It's fun. Um, Yay. Okay. So like Karen says, I organize by year for my studio on YouTube, on maybe Google. Maybe Google Drive. I save in folders. Oh, wait, you're saving videos. I gotcha. Stephanie's takeaway for this is a new folder, like landing spots. Yes, I love that. It's a nice way to declutter that desktop because there's something nice about being able to open a computer, and when you get to that first screen, it's not overwhelming, right? Okay, so that's it for our digital cleanup tips. Let's shift into our final topic here. But before I do that, I'll just remind you all, if you do want to get a hold of today's broadcast tips, if you drop the word spring down below on Instagram or on Facebook, you can get those delivered to you via the Savvy Sarah bot. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please check out the link inside of the description here. You know what, I'm going to give a couple links to people. You know what, I'll have to do that at another time. I'm having trouble with my computer. Blah. All right. Okay, so Haley had a question here. Great. I'm glad you asked this, Haley. Okay, so the person I'm talking about her name is Amy Chaplin. And her business is called Piano Pantry. And I believe if you go to pianopantry.com, you can learn about her. She's really fabulous. I think she's great. I had the pleasure of actually meeting her in person last year. Amy happened to be passing through my area. So she reached out to me, and we were able to get together and have lunch. And it was so cool to meet her in person. Like, I had such a great time chatting with her at Donna's Diner. Okay, so I see a bunch of springs. I see Don Krantz has just tuned in. Awesome. I love it. Okay, so let's get to our last point here. So we have talked about physical clutter. We have talked about digital clutter, and how to kind of refresh those spaces. Let's shift into some tips for inner renewal. Why is this so long? Let's make that less. Okay, so our tips for inner renewal is, as I mentioned, I'll reiterate what I mentioned at the top of the broadcast. Spring, we're headed into like the second recital season, right? I guess depending on your studio, you may have multiple recitals throughout the year, typically about the holidays. Sometimes people have Halloween ones, but spring recitals and that end of year recital, that seems to be like one of the most popular times for most teachers. And this is a busy time of year, not just for us, but also for our students, right? Whether you are teaching children, if you're teaching like under 18, this is a time of year where they've got a lot of testing, they've got a lot of spring sports, all of the other activities that they're doing in school are ramping up for end of year stuff. But if you're also teaching adults, and those adults might have kids, there's a lot of things going on. So it's important at this time of year to tap into the power of spring renewal, right? Tis the season. So we want to think about, what are some ways that we can better manage stress, both for you, the teacher, and the students in your studio. So one of the tips that I have is, take that extra moment to check in with capacity and to be mindful not only of your own capacity, but also the capacity of the person in front of you. So as you're teaching, really using those listening skills, those ABAL skills to see where your student is. And not just kind of like settling into, here's my list of things that we're going to do today. So take that extra moment to check in with capacity and, to see that person in front of you and recognize whether or not they need a little bit more space to explore or just space to breathe, right? Just space to relax and enjoy the act of making music. So that's something that I really like to be mindful of with my clients around this time of year. And I encourage you to try that out in your own studio as well. This is the time, also, like a second item here, this is also a great time to reestablish boundaries and, sit in with yourself and make sure that you're holding those boundaries that are good for you, whether that is not answering a text late at night, or if it's not answering emails on the weekend. What is that boundary that you need, so that you can prioritize your time and also ensure that you have time to relax and have a life outside of running your business. And the final thoughts here on inner renewal. All of those things that we talked about today, physical clutter, digital clutter, all of those can contribute to stress levels. So, if we can tap into getting those areas taken care of, that inner renewal is automatically going to come. And it's going to help us cultivate a better sense of joy and creativity, not just in our studios, but in our lives, right? So I encourage you, as we head into this season, let's make sure that we're making space to do the things that we love outside of work, whether that's a creative project or a hobby or shopping for new plants, right? Give yourself the gift of being present and really nurturing the things that make you happy. I love this. So this is great. Haley says the boundary convo has been coming up a lot this season, and it's making sure to reflect on what that means to you. I think that's a really powerful statement. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. If you have any tips on or any things that you would like to share on what you do for spring renewal, now's the time to put that into the chat. It is also time for me to mention, if you are thinking it is time for a little refresh and revamp in your studio, there is no better time than now to get started. This time of year tends to be when I get an uptick in requests for one-on-one coaching, because we're starting to approach the summer season, and this is often the time when teachers are taking the opportunity to revamp policies, to revisit the offers in their studio, or to think about how they want to change their business systems. So if that's been on your brain and you are looking for accountability and someone who can help you with that strategy, now's the time to reach out. So if you would like to get information about one-on-one coaching, or if you would like to get information, the tips that I mentioned here today, drop the word spring down below or look for the link in the YouTube description here. And now let's do our little rapid recap. And if you enjoyed today's broadcast, take a hot second. Make sure to love or like this video. Share it with a friend if you think that this conversation would be useful to them. That is the best way that you can show your appreciation here at Savvy Music Studio. And let's get ready for our recap. And here we go. All right. With spring unfolding, it is the perfect moment for a little renewal, both physically and mentally and emotionally. So here are 3 areas where you can spend a little time to figure out how you can have a spring refresh in your studio and your business life. All right, first, one of my favorite ways to refresh a space is to think about physical decluttering. So take a look around your studio space, your office space, and ask the question, where can I declutter? There are many different types of clutter, but I think the 3 main types for those types of spaces would be things like things that have a home but aren't in their home, things that don't have a home, those new resources we purchased but didn't put away, or things that can be thrown away and put in the trash. So pick one of those topics, go around your space, take 5 minutes, and get those things out of the way. It takes no time at all, and you're going to feel so much better once you've had that done. Now, in addition to physical decluttering, it can also be really useful to look at digital decluttering, as a lot of the stuff that we have nowadays is digital. So take a moment and think about, how can I improve my digital space? Maybe it is cleaning out that desktop if you have a lot of files on there that have been downloaded, but they haven't found a folder that might be their permanent home. Maybe it's figuring out a better naming protocol for files so that you can search for things easily. There are so many different ways that we can refresh our digital space. So just take a little time and answer the question, how would I like my digital space to be easier? And finally today, as we go through spring and we are reminded of the season for transformation, we have this opportunity for a little inner renewal. So take a moment to think about, how can I manage the stress level that might come with spring recital season? How can I check in with my own capacity and make sure that I'm operating in a way that feels good to me? And also keep in mind, how can we check in with the capacity of our clients as well? This is a busy season, not just for teachers, but for those people who are sitting on our benches and standing in front of those music stands. All right, well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. If you'd like to learn more about the topic that we talked about today, you can drop the word spring down below. And if you are looking for help in your studio in refreshing, revamping, or figuring out new business strategies, hit me up. We have space for one-on-one clients this spring and summer here at Savvy. All right, thanks so much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next week. And in the meantime, stay savvy and stay you, because you are an amazing teacher. And there is no one in the world quite like you. And I think you are pretty dang awesome. Thanks for being here.